What are you doing watching again? Okay, as you all so wish, so let's start where we ended. The petition didn't end the coercion. It delayed it. And in a world built on delay, on hearings scheduled, documents pending, further review, delay could be a kindness, or it could be a knife turned slowly until the victim understood what had been done too late. For Catherine, the waiting began to feel like hunger. Because every day they didn't force a replacement candidate inside the household, the men who tried to control her were reorganizing. Changing tactics. Finding softer hands to do harder work. One afternoon, Sarah brought Marcus a notice folded into thirds, as if even the paper knew it was carrying something dangerous. "From town," she said. Marcus unfolded it carefully. It wasn't a direct threat. It was worse. It was an invitation to comply. A correction to the earlier arrangement, an insistence that Catherine could avoid further disruption if she would agree to a new form of terms, more agreeable, more womanly, more easily managed. The language was polished like a blade. No one had signed it with their own name, only with a clerk's seal and a promise of official action. Marcus looked up at Catherine. Catherine read the notice without speaking, eyes steady, expression that of a person watching the tide come in. "They're trying again," Sarah said, voice tight. Catherine folded the paper once, then again. "But they're doing it differently," she replied. Because the replacement candidate was no longer the centerpiece. Now the centerpiece was Catherine's character. Now they wanted to convince the household, and the neighbors watching, that Catherine's refusal was less about consent and more about temperament. Less about rights and more about difficulty. In Lowndes County, that distinction mattered. It decided whether people would protect you, or treat your resistance as proof you deserved punishment. Marcus tapped the notice with one finger. "They're shifting from guardianship to social control." Sarah nodded, slow. "And social control is harder to defeat in a courtroom." Catherine stood then, moving with the quiet certainty she used when she chose where to place herself in danger. "Then we won't defeat it with only a courtroom," she said. That night they met with someone Marcus hadn't expected to trust, the printer's assistant, the young man whose job was to make the town's printed words look inevitable. He knew how notices were set, how rumors were smoothed into sentences, how official language was made to sound like it had always been true. He was terrified of the Sutton network. But he was also angry. Anger, Marcus had learned, was one of the few fuels men like Thomas could not fully control. Catherine explained the plan without dramatics, only precision. "We will not publish lies," she said. "We will publish what is recorded. We will publish what witnesses can verify. We will not accuse men by name unless we can prove their actions. But we will make their pattern impossible to deny." The printer's assistant swallowed. "If I help you, then you will survive it," Catherine answered, and Marcus could hear the steel in her calm. Because Catherine didn't offer bravery as a gift. She offered it as a strategy. The next morning, Bell River woke to an unexpected thing, not a headline, not a scandal screamed into the market. A notice, properly printed. It listed dates. It described visits. It recorded restrictions, mislaid letters, denied entry, oversight appointments, written not as emotion but as sequence. A timeline built like a fence. And then it ended with a line that made men hesitate before speaking to Catherine again. "Witnesses welcome. Recorders present. No accusations. No threats. Just the kind of clarity that forced liars to either speak truth, or admit they couldn't. By noon, talk in the town shifted. Men who had smiled too easily began to speak more cautiously. Women who had avoided Catherine's eyes found themselves watching her again, measuring the distance between what they'd been told and what they now read in ink. Sarah moved through the rooms after hearing the news, face composed but eyes burning with relief. "It worked," she said softly. Marcus looked at Catherine. "Not because we won," he corrected. "Because we changed what they can get away with." Catherine's expression didn't soften. "They still want to force marriage," she said. Marcus nodded. "So we keep them busy with records until there's no quiet space left for them to act." That's when the final escalation arrived, quiet, indirect, and therefore most terrifying. A servant knocked at the door with a request that sounded harmless. A final appointment needed to be scheduled. A last chance to prevent disruption. The messenger described it as an opportunity for Catherine's own comfort. Then the servant's eyes flicked toward Catherine's hands, toward the rings that were not on them, toward the places where a husband would be expected. It was a look that said, "They're trying to make you choose between dignity and survival." Catherine didn't take the bait. She asked for the appointment in writing. They refused at first. Of course they refused, because a written commitment meant discoverable intent. But Marcus had already anticipated the maneuver. He'd been gathering their denials, their evasions, their habit of refusing paper while demanding obedience. So when they finally returned with a written notice, signed, sealed, official, Marcus read it like a confession. And he saw what was hidden between phrases. A clause about compelled arrangement. A line describing interim custody of decisions. Language that tried to make coercion sound like stewardship. Marcus looked at Sarah. "They're admitting it," he said. Sarah's breath caught. "They're trying to make it permanent before the court can fully review." Catherine's voice was low. "Then we don't wait for them to act." She turned to Marcus and Sarah. "We set the counter-trap today." They moved fast, as if speed could outrun violence. Marcus contacted the witnesses they'd already prepared. Sarah asked neighbors to attend, not as support, not as worship, but as witnesses who could see how procedure behaved when it was observed. And Catherine made the most dangerous thing she could offer. She offered the men who wanted to control her no darkness. No secrecy. No room to pretend. When the final appointment arrived, it didn't arrive as romance. It arrived as pressure, surrounded by men with papers and smiles. But outside the door, the world watched. Not the whole world. Not a crowd cheering from a distance. Just enough eyes. Just enough recorders. Just enough truth to make coercion stumble over itself. And in that moment, Marcus understood the horror had stopped being only about what they would do to Catherine. It was also about what they couldn't do anymore, because Catherine had turned their tools into a spotlight. She hadn't escaped the Sutton network. Not yet. But she had already begun to dismantle its power, one public decision at a time. By the time the men realized witnesses were already present, their confidence had begun to decay into irritation. A county once ruled by whispers couldn't easily survive paperwork and onlookers at the same time. The representative stepped forward first, tidy coat, tidy words, as if neatness could make coercion gentler. "Miss Catherine," he began, voice rehearsed. "We're here to finalize an arrangement designed to prevent further disruption." Catherine didn't step back. She stepped into the light, into the space where every word could be recorded. "Then finalize it properly," she said. "In front of witnesses. With the terms read aloud exactly as written." Silence held for a beat, long enough for the representative to feel the room changing around him. A man behind him shifted, one of the fascist men, the silent ones who believed silence itself granted authority. But witnesses made silence costly. So the representative tried to keep control with procedure. He handed papers over like a doctor dealing with a patient who couldn't understand their own symptoms. Marcus took the papers with careful hands, and Catherine watched his face as if reading for hidden traps. Sarah kept her stance steady, close enough to stop anyone who tried to move too quickly, far enough to remain reasonable in the town's eyes. Catherine listened while the representative read. And as each clause came out, interim decisions, compelled arrangements, oversight framed as care, Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Not because he was surprised. Because the language was becoming clearer. Clearer meant survivable. Marcus stepped forward then and did what he had been training himself to do since the first refusal. He didn't argue like a person trying to win. He testified like evidence trying to outlive intimidation. He laid out the timeline again, dates, visits, restrictions, threats disguised as kindness, speaking calmly while others recorded. A few neighbors who'd been watching from the edges leaned closer. You could feel the moment when gossip turned into comprehension. The representative's mouth tightened. He tried to cut Marcus off. "This matter." Catherine interrupted, not loudly, not theatrically, just with the kind of certainty that made men uncomfortable. "You may speak your words," she said, "and we will answer with records and witnesses. That is the only arrangement I accept, truth spoken plainly." The representative looked toward the silent men as if hoping they could rescue him from the consequences of his own language. No one rescued him. Because there were too many eyes now. Too many ears now. Too much ink already drying. He finished his attempt with less grace than he'd begun it, and then, the way cruelty retreats when it has to perform, he left the papers with Marcus and withdrew the final appointment, on the spot, claiming, further review required. Further review. Delay dressed as mercy. But Catherine smiled then, small and exhausted, because she understood what delay actually meant. It meant their system had been slowed. It meant the trap required more time to set. And time, in a story like this, belonged to the person willing to keep records until monsters looked ordinary and criminal at the same time. That night, Bell River was quieter than before. Not safe. Not free. But changed. Catherine sat with Marcus and Sarah at the table, hands finally still. Marcus looked down at the papers he'd gathered, pages that had once seemed like burdens, and felt something like relief. Not because he believed the Sutton network was finished. Because he believed Catherine had taught it a new fear. They couldn't erase her consent anymore without paying in ink. Sarah leaned back in her chair, eyes on Catherine as if trying to memorize the way she held herself now. "You forced them to speak," Sarah said. Catherine exhaled. "I forced them to be seen doing it." Marcus gathered the last page and closed the journal carefully, like sealing a door. "So the story ends here. he asked, softly. Catherine looked up. The answer was not hopeful in the simple way. It was hopeful in the only way that lasted. No, she said. Stories don't end when the violence stops. She paused, then continued. They end when the world finally learns it can't pretend the violence never happened. Outside, the night remained dark. Inside, the refusal remained firm. End of Part 10. Part 11. 1848. A year later, Bell River still had men who believed power could be inherited like land. And it still had women who learned, too young, that obedience was sometimes the price of surviving another week. But the household at Bell River was no longer merely whispered about. It was referenced, cited, measured against what men tried to do when they thought witnesses would never arrive. Marcus had grown into the work, not because he wanted power, but because he understood power's opposite. Accountability. He trained the household's memory like a living thing, who said what, when they said it, which servant had seen what, which clerk had altered which line, which document had arrived, mislaid. Sarah kept her composure like armor, but her eyes had changed. Less wary now. More certain. And Catherine was still Catherine. She didn't become softened by survival. She became sharper with it. On a spring morning, a visitor arrived from town carrying a notice with official seals, new paperwork, new court calendars, new attempts to revisit arrangements. The visitor tried to read it aloud as if reciting a weather report. Marcus held up his hand. Before you begin, he said, calm as a judge who understood he was already being watched, you'll leave that paper with witnesses present. The visitor blinked, thrown off by the rule Catherine had taught them. He started to protest. Then he saw the faces in the room, people who weren't family, but weren't silent anymore. So he stopped. So he complied. And when the visitor realized compliance was not a favor, but a condition, his expression shifted into something like fear. Not fear of Catherine's strength. Fear of the cost of lying. Later that day, Catherine walked out into the yard. The air smelled like wet earth and new leaves. She paused near the place where the light fell longest. Sarah came to stand beside her. Do you think it will ever truly end? Sarah asked. Catherine watched the sky, as if listening for distant changes. It ends when they decide the lie isn't worth the trouble, she said. And sometimes trouble is the only thing you can afford to keep creating. Marcus approached with a stack of newly filed documents, some from court, some from witnesses, some from town records. He didn't smile. He didn't have to. They're still trying, he said quietly. Catherine nodded. Then we stay awake. They stood together in the yard, three figures in a household that had refused to become a silent page in someone else's book. This wasn't the ending of violence in some grand moral fairy tale. It was the ending of easy control. It was the slow, brutal education of a community that had once accepted cruelty dressed as procedure. And if the Sutton network remained a shadow behind every attempt, the household had become something brighter than a shield. A record that could not be erased. A refusal that could not be negotiated away. And a promise, held in ink and spoken aloud, carried forward not by hope alone, but by the stubborn, terrifying practice of telling the truth until the world had no room left to deny it. And after that, as you have watched all the parts and see the results, this is the summary to the whole story. Catherine refuses to be forced into marriage, and her refusal triggers escalating legal and social pressure from the Sutton network, which tries to replace her through proper arrangements. Although the men involved frame their actions as lawful concern, they use paperwork, guardianship/legitimacy threats, misinformation, restricted access to correspondence, and social isolation to coerce Catherine and undermine her autonomy. Sarah and Marcus respond by doing the one thing coercers fear: they refuse secrecy. Marcus builds detailed evidence, medical notes, journals, timelines, and correspondence, while Sarah and Catherine insist on transparency and witnesses. Each new maneuver, replacement candidate schemes, review notices, and implied compelled arrangements, is met with on-the-record confrontation and documentation. As a result, the town can't easily dismiss the household's claims as gossip or temperament, because the patterns are proven in public records. By the end, the coercion doesn't disappear overnight, but it becomes harder for the Sutton network to operate effectively. A year later, new attempts are still made, yet the household now has a reputation and enforcement mechanism. Officials must account for themselves in front of witnesses. The story closes with the family still staying awake, continuing their documentation and refusal, until the community learns that the violence dressed as procedure can't be erased or denied. This is the true end. Some things can't stop. Let's meet in next. Stag good, stay blessed and also healthy and wealthy. Again I am saying to you, don't see it. You can't hold on next.